Well, welcome. We're going to set a record 2 weeks in a row here. I'm Fred Hughes, and this is the next chapter where we talk about everything and everything that has to do with books or writing or any other written word related activities. This week's guest will be Piatt, and he'll be coming on here in a little bit to talk about his newest book release and how he became an author. But before we talk about that, usually I start the show with talking about what's new in the world of writing or authors or books. And I wanted to talk about, there's been an interesting Audible development that's come up in the last couple of weeks. For those of you who are, a lot of you, everybody knows what Audible is. Basically, Amazon owns it. It's a sort of a subscription service that you can buy a monthly subscription, get credits, get books. You can also just purchase the books from Amazon, etc. Amazon almost has a monopoly on audiobooks. There are very few other means for people to purchase audio versions of various works. Because of that, Amazon has a pretty tight pricing structure. Authors, when you put a book up on Audible, the best share you can expect to get as far as royalties is 40%. Now, that sounds like a lot, but if you're sharing your royalties with someone else, like I would be sharing royalties with my publisher, that means I would only get 20% and my publisher would get 20%, and audio gets 60% of the royalties. But wait, it's even worse than that, because that's just straight up royalties. Somewhere along the line, you had to hire a person to do the book. And if you want a top flight voice narrator to do your book, you're looking at paying $8,000, possibly even more. And obviously, the bigger name you have doing the book, the more likely it is your book will sell. But that's $8,000 as an author that you have to pay for out of your own pocket before you even put it up on audio. And so if you're only getting 40% of your royalties on the book sales, it takes a long time to make the $8,000 back on what the production cost of the book are. So Brandon Sanderson has had an issue with that for a while. And he's had a running fight with Amazon/Audible about royalties. Several of his most recent books are not available through audio. He has hired other people to produce them, and he's releasing them through other activities, whether it be Apple or any of the other audio/music type activities that will sell audio versions of material. Because Sanderson is so huge, Amazon has agreed across the board that they're going to increase and modify their royalty system. What it's going to be yet, none of us see. None of us have seen. We don't know. But Sanderson has, for all of us, and again, it's not the first time Brandon's done this, helped out his fellow authors by not just getting an increase for himself, but getting an increase for all of us. So stay tuned. As this develops, we'll talk about it more. Hi, and this week's guest, Piatt. well-known science fiction, military science fiction author whose Abner Fortis Space Marine series is done very well. A lot of you folks out there who like science fiction have read it. Not only has he done Abner Fortis novels, he's done a variety of short stories in various anthologies, the We Dare anthology, Salvage Title Coalition anthology. He's written some short stories for Bill Webb, who's been a guest on the show, in his Last Brigade Universe anthologies. So, without further ado, my friend, Paul Piatt. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, Fred, thank you very much.
So let's talk about, at least to begin with, how you got started as an author. Because like myself, you're retired Navy. So
Correct.
So what got you into writing?
Well, I actually picked up a book called Gun Monkeys in like 2004, and I read it basically cover to cover in a day. And the story is absolutely fantastic. It's written by a guy who's now a friend of mine, Victor Gischler. And I was just so enamored by the story. I said, maybe I could do that. How hard can it be, right?
Yeah.
So 15 years later, when I wrote the end on my first novel, I realized it's not that easy. And in between that, I retired. I got a job as in a groundhog colony as a contractor in my cubicle, and gave all that up and decided I was going to focus on writing. So I joined a couple internet groups, a couple Facebook groups, and wrote some short stories for some anthologies and got picked up and thought it was really cool, and decided I would start writing a novel. And I finished that one, and it was so much fun. I wrote the next one, and I was totally indie at that point. So I was, paying $11 for a Fiverr cover and doing my own editing. But you know what? It was a start, and it got me experience.
So what was that? What was that first book?
The first book was in the Walter Bailey Misadventures series, and it's called Red Caps Rising. And it's about a young man who is a pizza delivery guy in Chicago, who receives a telegram one day that his grandmother has been murdered and he's the only living heir. So he needs to come back to Mississippi to take care of her estate. And then he has like a magical awakening and has some adventures with the elves that live in his grandmother's garden shed. And they go on a madcap road trip to Las Vegas. That's it right there, the blue cover, Red Caps Rising. They have a madcap adventure road trip to Las Vegas and back in search of vengeance, which they really don't get. But in any case, I finished that one and decided, that was a lot of fun. Maybe I'll write another one. And I ended up making it a trilogy.
So how long did it take you to write that first book?
My gosh, probably 3 or 4 months. I wrote the chapters at about 1,000 words a piece. So I was writing about 1,000 words a day. And I was writing a chapter a day because I figured, if anybody's going to read this, they're going to be reading it on the can on their phone. And so I put 1,000 word on each chapter, and then you can sit down and read a chapter and do your business and go back to work. So that was the impetus for my 1,000 word chapters. And I didn't write steady, and I was writing short stories in the middle of it. So I didn't have a timetable. I was doing it for myself and not really for anybody else, no publisher or anything. So I just kept writing. And then I finished the second one, Conjurer of Chaos, and people that were fans of the series, both of them, said that I should finish it up, make it a trilogy. So that spawned Heretic's Fork.
And now I'm jealous because I'll be honest, I didn't realize you'd written this series. And I'm jealous because all I've written is sci-fi, mill sci-fi. And here you are, you've written, something beyond, elves and gnomes and, magic and things like that. And I'm going, well, damn, I wish I could write that.
Well, it's really kind of a spoof on fantasy and magic, because the magic in that universe never works the way people think it's gonna. When they cast a spell, yeah, they get the effect they want, and so much more. And so it's not like there's any great Gandalf guy or Merlin or something who can just cast a spell with their staff and turn people into toads. Because when they do that, then they cause something else to happen. Unintended consequences are
Okay.
rife.
So, well, after we take this break, we're going to come back and talk to Paul about his next adventures. This is Fred Hughes in the next chapter. And we're back, Fred Hughes and the next chapter. And this week we're talking to Paul Piatt, well-known science fiction author. And Paul's telling us about how he got started as an author and actually writing fantasy spoofs, I guess, would be the right way of phrasing it. As an independent author, just like, well, there's a bunch of us that's the way we started. So, what was next after your first trilogy that you put out as an indie?
I kind of fired in all directions. I wrote a vampire horror story novel that I'm actually working on the second book in that planned trilogy. I wrote some other standalone science fiction novels about aliens visiting Earth and that kind of stuff. And just sort of exploring. And I also did a bunch of short stories. You can see the anthologies there. Just different topics that just seemed like fun. Friends were putting together anthologies and put out anthology calls, and so I wrote for them, just to basically try everything and anything from the supernatural stuff to Bill Webb's Last Brigade to my own sci-fi short stories. And then one night I was working on, I believe it was the third book in the Walter Bailey series. It was late, and a commercial came on for an outfit called Honor Flight. And what they are is an organization dedicated to taking as many World War II veterans as possible to Washington, D.C. to see the National World War II Memorial before they pass, because that generation is, quite frankly, they're moving on. Greatest generation, we're losing them every day. And most of them probably don't have the financial wherewithal to travel to D.C. to see the memorial that was erected in their honor. So this organization pays for their airfare. A lot of them are pilots, so they fly them on their own dime, put them up in hotels, and take tour groups of these guys to the memorial so they can see it, and they can also see the sites in D.C. And I thought that was fantastic. And that just got the wheels, churning, how ideas come to you as an author. Mm-hmm. And I said, what would be really funny is if a plane load of these guys, if some crazy person jumped on a plane load of these guys and tried to hijack it. And these guys would absolutely whip ass, because they weren't afraid of the Japanese or the Germans. Why are they going to be afraid of a couple scumbags with pistols? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that idea has kind of been done many times. Hijacking planes. Some of them planes with snakes. Some of Air Force One. Yeah. You name it. Every star's had their Air Force or their airplane hijacking film. So I said, all right, well, let me sci-fi it up. And I created a situation where a bunch of octogenarian and septuagenarian space marines were on an honor flight to the site of their biggest battle. When an old enemy, yep, there it is, honor flight. When an old enemy reemerges. And the fate of the human race is up to these 200 geezers who are all, they've been out of the service for a long time, but by golly, they're not going to go down quietly. And they're on an unarmed transport ship. And there's only 200 of them, and it's the entire enemy fleet. So how are they going to stop this invasion? And the story is how they do it. And I really tried hard to capture the feelings that I saw in the pictures of the actual veterans who were flying to Washington. They had some pictures of them, on the airplanes, and you could see in their faces that they were 18 again and having the time of their lives with all their war buddies, and probably trading stories and insults like veterans do. And so I tried to capture that feeling amongst these retired Space Marines. And they were from all walks of life. They were farmers and doctors and welders and fishermen, lumberjacks, you name it. They all came together. They fought their war. They went back home. And now they were reunited for one last honor flight. And they're called upon one last time to save the human race. And that's what the novel Honor Flight is about. And the lead character in that novel is Abner Fortas, a retired colonel, and his sidekick, best friend, Peter Yastrzemski, who's a retired gunnery sergeant. And the whole thing is about them organizing and fighting this last battle for the fate of the human race. And after I wrote that, people really enjoyed it. I mean, I got emails from people and notes from people, and they were like, "This book was fantastic." And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to rewind. I'm going to go back to the day that Abner Fortas was a boot second lieutenant, brand new butter bar, a cherry even, and start his career from the beginning.
Hence the name of the first book.
That's right. His very first combat drop is a cherry drop. He's a cherry, and that's his first drop. And so his career begins with him as the assistant platoon commander, making his cherry drop on a planet in support of some scientific experimentation, that everything goes sideways, and they end up in a fight for their lives against some unexpected enemies and the megafauna on the planet that they drop on. And Fortas, manages to lead his platoon through that with the help of some serious, hardcore senior enlisted guys. And he learns and grows a little bit. And at the end of it, he ends up somehow being court-martialed as just a show of the absolute stupidity sometimes that seems to seize the military. But that's essentially the first novel. And that's him as a second lieutenant, brand new, making his cherry drop, and the adventures that he experiences.
And so the rest of the series that you've written, and you're about, and we'll talk about that in the next segment, but you're about to release the 10th book, right, in what I'll call it the prequel to Honor Flight, because Honor Flight was a standalone novel.
Right.
And basically, because of the enthusiasm of the readers, you decided, I'm going to tell more stories about Abner.
Yeah, exactly. People reacted to the character. They liked his personification. A lot of them liked the fact that it wasn't all just, kill them all, let God sort them out kind of action. There was some emotion, some growth, personality, some humor. War, although it can be, and I don't have personal experience at this, but from what I have read and seen from other people who have, it's 98% sheer boredom and 2% what's going on, crazy action. And so, it's what happens in that 98% that really sets up everything for the action.
So after the break, we'll talk about Paul's next book. We'll be back. All right, and we're back with Paul, and he's telling us about Abner Fortas. I would say, your signature character, you created Abner, and you've written soon to be 10 books about him. So you started with Cherry Drop, him a brand new second lieutenant, and through the first 9 books, you basically show the evolution of this Marine officer, Space Marine officer. So tell us about the book that's coming up.
The book that's coming out is Holy War. And the story, essentially, there's a big drawdown in the military, the fleet and the Space Marines, and a lot of disgruntled former Space Marines and fleet personnel. And there's basically a cult called the Kuiper Knights, who decided this is a good time to recruit among those ranks of people that are just, separated, rifted, if you will. And so they do that. They do the recruiting, and they take them off to the free sector. And the Kuiper Knights, of course, have an ulterior motive for this. And so they hijack a shipload of weapons. And so that's the setup. The Fortas and his team identify the weapons, locate them. The fleet comes in and destroys them. And then Holy War, the Kuiper Knights are angered by the attack on what they consider their ship. So they order a terrorist attack on the United Nations of Terra, on Terra Earth. And in response to that, Terra Earth mobilizes an entire division of Space Marines to travel to the free sector where the Kuiper Knights are holed up and destroy them, much like our reaction to 9/11 to invade Afghanistan and destroy the Taliban. And so the book deals with that invasion, identifies some new bad guys, well, maybe not so new, but kind of brings them to the forefront to continue the action. And at the end of Holy War, the Kuiper Knights are vanquished, the Space Marines are victorious, and Fortas and his guys return home. And then that action leads into number 11, which I'm writing now, called War Criminal, where Fortas is assigned to pursue and persecute some of the leadership of the Kuiper Knights who have escaped. So Holy War is about the battle between and the invasion of the Kuiper Knight stronghold and the Space Marine division assigned to go and root them out. So it's a little more combat action than the others have been, not quite as much intrigue.
But it sounds like book 11 is going to shift back to being much more on the intrigue side.
It's, actually it's got like 1 foot on the intrigue dock and 1 foot on the combat action boat. And hopefully I don't fall in the water between them. Because, well, in number 11, they begin as a covert team sent to find these guys, this leadership, and end up in a combat action with troops. So it's it's kind of a mix. But Fortas is a major now. He started out as a second Louis in Cherry Drop, and by Holy War he's a major. So his units are getting bigger, and it's a little more unwieldy to write. Him in action as a major.
I have the same issue. It was easy when my principal character just commanded a single ship, and now he commands fleets, and it's like, oh, this is so hard.
Because you want to keep it about the main character, but at the same time, they're in the command center directing the action. They're not actually flying or
they're not. Yeah, they're not out on the pointy end of the stick, and
That's right.
and I shouldn't say unfortunately, but part of being a mill sci-fi writer is that people want to read about that part too.
Sure.
So you have to develop other characters that are going to be in those combat situations.
Right. And that's kind of why I've got Fortis doing sort of special operations stuff, because he can act as, an operator, as a major, um, without without leading, a squad or a platoon, where he would be, way out of line with the size of the force. So that's kind of a challenge. And then, for the follow-on book to War Criminal, he's going to be a colonel. And so that is going to be his, his leadership challenge, a colonel in charge of a regiment. And he's going to have to, do things as a commanding colonel.
Yes, he's going to have to stay by the radio and give direction and not.
Well, you would think so, but
But that's not the way you're going to write it.
no. He's going to get involved.
Well,
he's going to get involved.
You have to, and I'm sure you'll have his gunnery sergeant barking at him that he's not supposed to be out there.
Yeah, there's some of that in Holy War. He chafes at riding in the command mech, and Yastrzemski's like, "Look, you got to ride in the command mech because we only have one commanding major, and you're supposed to be looking at the big picture, taking care of these things. So get back in there." Because he wants to slog it out with the grunts. He wants to get muddy, lug a rifle, but he doesn't get that opportunity.
So, your 10's coming out, 11 you're writing. Any timeline on when you think?
I got about 15,000 words to go
Okay.
for my word target, and after that, it's editing, stitching all these crazy pieces together. And I've started to write some of the bigger scenes for number 12.
Oh, so you already have 12 in.
Kind of planned a little bit. I don't have a specific direction. I know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
I just got to get there. So, yeah, I would expect sometime middle of the year, maybe, depending on what Chris Kennedy Publishing's schedule looks like. June, July, August, whenever I get it turned in, edited, the cover made, I'm sure he'll publish it as soon as he can.
Yeah.
And then hopefully by the end of the year, number 12.
Sounds interesting. But what else is a passion for you? You have all these Abner Fortis, and I understand, you got to write what's hot, what's selling, but what else are you thinking about besides Space Marines?
I mentioned earlier that I have a sequel to my vampire horror novel started, and I'm actually very close to writing the final kind of battle in that novel. So, and that's pure indie. I wrote that.
You're going to stay indie on that
just for fun. And so I will. I open it up every now and again, hang 1,000 words on it or so, and I think if I spent just a week of dedicated time and effort, I'd have it done. It's just a question of getting that week. Things have been a little tumultuous for me lately. I've got some short stories that I've kind of been poking at, and another series of short novels that I want a quick release. So yeah, I got I'm juggling chainsaws, a lot of chainsaws. That's what it feels like anyway.
Well, I mean, I was going to make the comment, the way you write, I could never write like that. I mean, I'm writing my book 9 in my principal series right now. And I couldn't imagine having 3 books in that series open at the same time, because it's hard enough for me to keep everything on track of what I'm writing now in one series, let alone, I mean, you're talking about you're already writing battle scenes for book 12. So, I mean, I can't imagine being organized enough to do that.
Well, a lot of authors outline ahead of time. and then they follow the author. The outline and write their book. I actually outline as I'm going. When I finish a chapter, I add to the outline what's in that chapter. So I have a pretty good idea where everybody's at. I may not know exactly where they're going, but I know where everybody's at currently. So I could start the next chapter with confidence that somebody doesn't just disappear.
And then
Because when you get half a dozen characters moving in different directions, and you want to bring them all together and have giant collisions, encounters, conflict, or whatever, it helps to know where they're at.
oh yeah,
Because inevitably somebody's going to go, "Hey, what about Joe?"
yeah,
and what about Joe?
And then all of a sudden you discovered, oh, we left him behind.
Joe, and I just brought him back to life. Oops.
Oops.
Yeah, I did that in Holy War.
After the break, we're going to talk more with Paul Piatt. He's going to answer some questions for us. Be back in a moment. So we're back, final segment, talking to Paul Piatt, author of the Abner Fortis Space Marine Corps series. And yeah, I'm glad to hear, Paul, you were talking about how Chris mentioned that, hey, you just added this guy and you just killed him. Yeah, I haven't done that yet, but he's doing a final read through on my next release. And he said, oh, you said that you dropped this guy off on this planet, but you never brought him along. He's still back on Earth, so what's the deal? And I'm going, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that. Fortunately, it was easy. He asked, you just want me to fix it? I said, yeah, just go ahead and fix it. I want him, he needs to get dropped off on this planet because he's got shit he's got to do there. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that has that problem. So, want to ask you some questions, and I have questions made up, and I'm always interested to hear what various authors how answer. And the one that seems to be popular, and I did not ask Bill this, but I did ask John Sears this last week. What family members or close friends are in your books, maybe not under their own names, but when you wrote the character or the person, this is so-and-so or this is so-and-so. And, you sort of modeled them off of that. Do you do that as an author?
I try not to, because inevitably, if you do it with one person and they happen to find out, then other people may come to expect it. I do have people that I've put into books and killed because I didn't like them in real life. So I modeled characters after them. But as far as, family and friends appearing, not really. I do have a couple of characters. A friend of mine, her son is like an Abner Fortis super fan. So he appeared in a novel, and his brother also appeared, and they are brothers in the novels. But that was kind of a special case. But as a general rule, I really don't. I don't try to.
Okay. So, what's the favorite character you've written? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in Abner Fortis. It can be in any of your books that you really feel you should have killed that character off.
Oh boy, should have killed him off?
Yeah. He's still alive, and it's like, I really should get rid of him. And if you don't have an answer, that's okay.
I got to tell you, I can't think of any because I'm pretty liberal with the kill stick.
I know you are, and that comes to the next question: which character do you wish you hadn't killed off?
None.
None.
They all deserved
they all
it.
deserved it.
The main characters, like every series, the main character survives. It's pretty easy to determine which of his friends will likely survive. But other than that, everybody's a red shirt at that point.
Everybody. And for those of you who aren't as old as Paul and I are, a red shirt is reference to the original Star Trek series.
Yes.
And if you don't understand it, Google it. But you're sort of like I am. You don't do a lot of conventions. I don't either. I'd rather be at home and writing than running around the country trying to slap my books. But between conventions that you might have gone to and questions you get asked, what question do you get asked the most from fans or people who find out that you are an author?
Well, actually, I don't get asked a lot of questions because, like you said, I don't do cons. And that really is a function of, when I started all this, I promised my wife that it would be self-sustaining, and I haven't achieved a level of success that I can comfortably feel like, oh, I'll just go, spend $600 on a hotel room, another $1,000 on books, and hopefully make it all back. But anyway, I get the occasional email from fans asking about certain plot points or characters, but as far as people asking like, "Where do you get your story ideas?" or "How do you come up with this?" I don't get a lot of that. Honestly, um, I don't know, none really, I guess.
So, are there any other authors out there, and don't necessarily have to include any Chris Kennedys? I mean, there are several people that I always reference when I talk about, hey, this guy influenced me in my writing, whether it was in my prose or whether it was in the way I set up battles or fought battles. Are there authors out there that you like, yeah, I like the way this guy writes battles, and you've tried to emulate them, or I like the way this guy creates characters?
Victor Gischler is the man who wrote Gun Monkeys, which is the book I referenced that I started to read in, I think, 2004, and really got me interested in writing. I like his style of writing. He's written everything from westerns to fantasy to current law enforcement, and I just like his style and the way he develops his characters. There was also a book that I read a long time ago called The Five Fingers. And the name of the author escapes me, but I have owned probably 8 copies of that book. And the combat action, as it's described in that book, is, second to none in my view. And if I could emulate anybody in their combat action sequences, it's that book. And I wish I could. The name escapes me right now, but if you look it up in Amazon or on the internet, The Five Fingers, it's a Vietnam mission, and it is head and shoulders above everything else I've read. But I can't think of anybody else specifically that I wish I could write more like.
Oh, all right. Last question, real quick. What's a genre that you could never see yourself writing in?
Romance.
Well, I knew that, aside from romance, and you can't, and not reverse harem either.
I think any of the multiple genres that fall under romance, not because I'm not a romantic guy, but it's
not in you.
It escapes me. I don't feel it. You know what I mean?
I understand.
It just escapes me.
Well, Paul Piatt, author of military science fiction, his new book, Holy War, is coming out next Friday. So that's it for this week. Fred Hughes, the next chapter. See you next week.